this one for you guys, and then maybe we can bring this one. Test, test, test. Okay.
Very touching. It's quite emotional. Very emotional, very touching.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျမနာမည်ကြတော့ဂေထောလို့ခေါ်ပါဒီ NGI ကအကြောင်းသူတစ်ယောက်ပါ
Maybe, is it possible to do it? Can we use the version?
သူတို့မှလည်းကြမ်းမရှိဘူးအဲဒါကြောင့်တစ်လှည့်စီပြောမယ်နော်သူတို့မှလည်းကြမ်းမတက်ထားဘူးအဲဒါကြောင့်တစ်လှည့်စီပြောမယ်လို့
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျမနာမည်ဂေထောပါ NGI မှာတက်နေတဲ့ကြတင်တန်းသားတစ်ယောက်ပါ
Okay ပြော
ပထမဦးဆုံးဒီဆရာကိုမေးချင်တာပေါ့နော်ခုနကဆရာပြောတာကြတော့လေfreedom တည်င်းလွတ်လပ်ခွင့်မှာပေါ့နော်ကိုယ့်ဟာကိုယူရမယ်မိုးပေါ်ကြလာကိုမိုးပေါ်ကကြလာမှာမဟုတ်ဘူးဆရာပြောတဲ့အချက်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါတည်င်းလွတ်လပ်ခွင့်အပြည့်အဝရရှိဖို့တော့ပေါ့နော်ဘလို့ကတ်ချက်တွေရှိဖို့လိုအပ်လဲပေါ့အဲ့ဒါဆရာကိုမေးချင်ပါတယ်
This her question goes to Itam. You said that the freedom of press does not fall from the sky, that people or the individuals have to fight for that. And what are the criteria to have the freedom of press and information?
Well, the data that I was taking is from Reporters Sans Frontières. It is the Reporters Without Borders, based in Paris. So they make several criteria in which put every country has their own indicator. For instance, they put the political situation in general as who is the leader in the country, which is the civilian president or military, for instance. And then the other part also they put the criteria of how often the attack or the harassment against the media happening, like in 1 year, 1 month. This is how the Reporters Sans Frontières put the index of press freedom in each country.
နောက်ထပ်မေးခွန်းတစ်ခုအနေနဲ့ကြတော့တည်င်းတော်များရဲ့လက်တွေ့ပေါ့နော်လုပ်ငန်းဆောင်တာတွေကိုပေါ့ရုပ်ရှင်တွေနဲ့ပြန်လိုက်ဖန်တီးဖို့တော့လိုအပ်သလားအဲ့ဒါဆရာရဲ့မေးချင်တာပေါ့
Sorry, I don't.
လိုအပ်သလားဟုတ်လား
ဟုတ်ကဲ့အပြင်မှာတကယ်လက်တွေ့ပေါ့နော်သူတို့ရဲ့စ조사မှုတွေပေါ့အဲ့လားပြန်မလဲပေါ်ထောက်ဖို့အတွက်ရုပ်ရှင်နဲ့ပြန်ပြီးပြန်လဲဖန်တီးဖို့လိုအပ်သလားပေါ့ဟုတ်ကဲ့
This is what she asked exactly.
I didn't hear you because if you wouldn't mind.
So, do you think it would be better for the movie industry to express freedoms of expression and as a creator, as a profile, as we showed in some movie yesterday at the ceremony, to be necessary to express as a profile, to see people as a journalist or as a
Well, I will try to answer based on my understanding. I guess movie is could be very good and very effective way in a country where there is not enough press freedom, because movie in a way it could be part of the freedom of expression and not directly freedom of the press, because some movie could be also doesn't reflect the journalism, but it can be contain the truth. So you can use either journalism or movie to portray the situation. If you cannot voice up your story through journalism, movie can be a good way to express the situation and to help the journalist condition in your country.
Jizaba. Working? No. Yes? This question for Utin Mang Mang A. I have two questions. I wonder how you find it coming back to work with the Ministry of Education. Since you left the country as a university student, do you see genuine reform within the ministry? And are you working with any of the holdovers? How do you feel being now part of the government? And can you comment at all on the higher education system? Because I believe historically and to this day, the ministry concentrates more on basic, on the primary and secondary. And do you see some of the same principles you talked about or other things that may help reform the higher education system?
Coming back here is not the overnight decision, though, because I lived in the U.S. for about 25 years. I didn't plan to come back to this country. We never thought that we'll be able to come back anyway, because we never thought that the military will be ever given up power. The change that we have always expected is more like a regime change, just complete change of the government or regime. This is something that we have always been fought for and expected, right? But the change is not what we expected. It's a military. It's a carefully planned transition. It's well-planned transition. If you look at the constitution of this country, you will not find it anywhere else. They take in all the components that needed to provide protections and the safety that they needed, not only for themselves, also for their family members and their other friends. So it was a bit challenging for me to be able to come back first place, right? In the beginning, it was very high expectation because transition, 2015 was a turning point. So I came back prior to that to work in the education for the child laborers, the kids on the streets. I thought that was a very safe way for me to reconnect with my roots and everything, right? But this new government, with the NLE government, that's when I'm currently working very closely with the Ministry of Education in the education reform process. So still like a mix, sort of like a feeling, and then expectations are becoming a lot more managed, I guess. It's not like before. It was really excited and then high expectations, and then we thought all of us left the country one point, we'll come back and then work with the government and then do whatever we can to participate. But those things didn't become reality. So right now, we're still going with the flow. For me especially, I don't really know how things are going to turn up. But I don't think the situation is going to go back to where we were, under the military, because the Constitution is pretty much guaranteed, as I mentioned earlier, that their safety, security, and everything they needed for them to let go of the power gradually. How long it's going to take, how much of the power is going to be relieved, it's still, I think, big question mark. We're facing issues that are not sort of like in the initial script, so to speak. Talking about the Yangon issue, talking about the economic situation that we're facing, right? So we still have to wait and see. I think it depends on how we all work together. I'm talking about working together like both the government, elected government, and also appointed government, and then also international community, everything, right? Which in current situation, I don't think we're on the same page, especially when we talked about the international community. International community, and especially with the international media, has a different perspective, and also they see the different picture. I feel like it's sort of like we're looking at the painting. If you look at it a bit far, you probably don't see any gray area between colors and the shapes. The closer you get to the painting, you start to see gray areas. Things are not black and white anymore. So I feel like I was looking at it far away. Now I'm like right very close to it. So my decision to come back, so far so good, but we just have to wait and see. I haven't really made up my mind in terms of whether I'm going to be here for a long time or not. In terms of education reform, it started in 2012 with the President Thein Sein's government called CESR, Comprehensive Education Sector Review, which led to 2014 and 15 National Education Law, which was protested by students. A lot of them are arrested. Amended in 2015, and then now we're on the 5-year education reform plan called NESP, National Education Strategic Plan. In this plan, there are many sectors that are involved in it: basic education, higher education, technical and vocational, out-of-school education as well. But in terms of higher education, reforms are taking place. Since previous administration, the investment of education budget is at least 8 times increase. Before it was like 1.3% of the government budget. Now it's about 8 or 9% of the government budget. So it's significantly increased. Decentralizations, it's taking place, but the speed and then the effectiveness is still, challenge, questionable, because, as I mentioned, even the will of the leaders or minister and then the politicians, the high-level leaders, even though they have the good intention, but in reality, we're still running with the old system. The structures, bureaucracy is still intact. Along with that, there's a people that already in the system for 20, 25 years. So that's the challenge that we face, right? So in the higher education, one of the reforms that I could point out is the decentralization of the distant education system. So before it was run by the 2 universities, Yangon University and then Mandalay University. Right now, it's been decentralized to all the regional colleges and universities. So things are happening, but it will take some time to sort of like see the outcomes and the fruits. But I'm hopeful that we keep pushing it, working closely, and then supporting both the ministry and then also with the civil society, and then what we need to happen for the education system, which is what we needed to get to this the reform to be successful. So things are taking place, especially in the higher education level. And another thing that I want to point out is also before there is a higher education department that the DG has a lot of control over the higher education system. Now those authorities and powers been shifted. Some of those been shifted to the democratically elected committee of rectors. There's a rector committees that currently working on drafting of the bylaws of the universities and other things. So things are taking place. We have not seen the outcomes yet, but I'm quite hopeful.
Can I just ask a quick question of Kiri? At some point during the presentation, I think I heard you say that for the most part, the people that were arrested or implicated in the massacre were thugs and just sort of local goons. But I thought there was a prominent member of the Ampatuan family that was jailed and was even sort of treated very well in jail, let out, etc. And also, just to follow up, is the Ampatuan family still the ruling family in Maguindanao region?
Okay, I was speaking of the context of impunity during the time of the massacre. So when I said that there were only 10 convictions, I was talking not about the case of the Maguindanao massacre, but the climate of injustice in terms of the existing cases of media killings, which allowed this kind of massacre to happen, because it was already happening for decades. So like I mentioned, 146 killed and only 10 convictions, but they were lookouts or the gunmen. In the case of the Ampatuan massacre, there are still 0 convictions. Until the case is still ongoing, there are 200 suspects, but only 115 have been arrested and arraigned. There have been excesses in terms of the Ampatuans being able to leave jail, for example, to attend the debut of a daughter or attend a wedding. So these are recent developments. The promise of the government was supposedly this year there will be a conviction, but still none. The Ampatuans, the one in power are now the Mangudadatus. So Ismail Mangudadatu is now in power, but there are still members of the Ampatuan family who are still very powerful at the moment. But they have never really lost their hold in the region. But Ismail has risen also.
So I think we have time for maybe one last question before wrapping it up. Yes?
Once upon a time, in Myanmar journalism, there are Myanmar journalists, Hiro, for example, went in, and at that time, so many Uchimao, so many, including Guangsan, nowadays and for the future, how do you think?
Yes. I see the current media climate and journalism sector. There's 2 parts. In the past, you mentioned some of those prominent individuals, especially Handari, the journalist is very much close to me as well. But 2 parts is like before we were like in a closed society, everything shut down, everything was locked up. So we didn't have sort of like options of freedom to even speak out, right? Even for us to exercise. We don't even know what our rights are, right? From that state to where we are right now, Myanmar has opened up in really interesting time that the whole world is all connected already when Myanmar opened up recently, a few years ago. That means social medias and the things, everything's already out there for us. It's not like, even like we're using these smartphones and the social media and the Facebook, we didn't have to go through keypad. In the US, other countries, they've gone through all the stages that citizens, especially the journalists, we learn how to respond to those stages in much more proper and much more responsive way. So when Myanmar opened up, everything's already out there. We just grab it and use it as we find fit, which also lies, the responsibility also lies on the both sides. I've seen some journalists reporting without proper sort of like a understanding or sort of like a connecting or even realizing the historic facts or current situations or things, right? That part is also need to be improved. And then on the other hand, the authorities becoming a lot more controlled and they're centralized because of those issues, they become a lot more concerned. The whole country seems to be on the social media these days without having education that I talked about. That education means not just passing grades. Be able to differentiate and then make decision between right and wrong. Be able to think critically. Be able to analyze and then be able to decide what is right and what is wrong. That very fundamental knowledge it has to come from the education system. So that part is also not fully realized in our country. So when you put together lack of education, lack of responsibility from the citizen sides, and then freedom of press, and then all these medias and everything is available, and then at the same time, government becoming more concerned, and then restricting, and then reacting and responding without really going through the process. So in order for us to pass that stage, I think all these components have to take their own responsibility. Also from the journalism perspective also, I think, in terms of making sure that evidence and the facts that are presenting or expressing has a solid backing on it as well, right? Not just speaking of popular issues and any other things. I think in order for us to reach to the level of journalism, all of us have to work together in a sort of like a more like a positive and then more like a collaborative approach. And then that will also allow us to build trust in the level that whatever the journalists are reporting are solid and the ground and then reliable and then responsible, right? So for their education is a lot to be done, both from the citizen perspective, also from the journalism perspective. I'm really happy to see this sort of like a memory film festival is taking place, conferences are taking place, people are supporting with the, Myanmar script funds and then all these things. I think we're also learning together along this process. But we have to be careful of where we were not too long ago and then where we are hoping to get in the near future. I think be aware of where we are and then working together is the key for us to get to that level. I'm pretty hopeful that we will get there. We have no choice. We have to get there. But the question is, when we get there, we will be able to stay together as a country, as a society. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So I think with that, we need to wrap up. I want to thank all the presenters from the morning session. Roland, Natida, who I believe left already, Howard Besser from the afternoon, Carrie Dalena, Timai Hardy, Suresh, Item. Thank you so much. Thanks to Memory for supporting the festival. And thanks you guys for coming out and sitting with us.